And we are recording. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today with Commerce and Conversation. I know it's a little off because it's Thursday instead of Monday, so I do appreciate everyone jumping on. I am very happy to introduce, we have Christopher Scott with us this morning. He's with Farmers Insurance and our Western Commissioner. So I'm going to kind of let you jump on here, Chris, and kind of give a little introduction on yourself. Tell us a little about you, and then we'll kind of jump into conversation this morning.
Excellent. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for inviting me to present this morning. Background on myself, largely come out of nerd world. I'm an old IT guy. I've had many jobs in the past centered around IT, computers, banking, software development, corporate management as well, risk management, government contracting, pretty broad background. I've been everything from the traveling nerd who installed banking computer systems to the corporate director who's oversaw the entire projects. I am a certified PMI project management professional. Also a licensed insurance agent now for almost 10 years, working for myself. I got out of the rat race and decided this was the last guy I wanted to work for. So I am self-employed, 1099 with Farmers Insurance. Also am financially certified, FINRA Series 6 and 63 for mutual fund investing. So I also provide investing advice for retirement planning, 529 education savings accounts, and life insurance as part of a retirement portfolio, etc. So a very broad background from technology to corporate management to project management to insurance and finance, a little bit of everything. So
what? No, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Just going to say, I have a passion for small business and helping small business, have a passion for people. That's what led me into being elected as Western District Commissioner. When I said this is the last guy I wanted to work for, I went and got elected, worked for 45,000 people now. So it went from working in the corporate world to working for one, working for many. But I have a passion for helping people. And so I love being able to do this. I love coaching with small businesses as well. For a few years before COVID, I did a small business group in Jefferson City, sort of linked through the Jefferson City Chamber, but not really part of the chamber event. I headed that as a separate organization, but a lot of the folks who attended were friends and connections through the Jefferson City Chamber. But we did small business coaching through monthly meetings as well, and various topics with welcome speakers, and much like you're doing now. So I thank you, Jamie, and the Chamber for what you're doing for all the small businesses around the area.
Absolutely.
So where would you like me to start?
I would love for you to start with, let's talk about the individuals that are looking to get started with their business. And, just we're out of all those hats that you kind of just talked about there, can you put the insurance hat back on a little bit? Because that seems to be the biggest place where people have a lot of, very little understanding of what they need to be looking for as they in the startup phase.
Right. And for a lot of people, it's almost a second thought to running the business, right? You have a passion for something you're really good at, and you think, hey, I can make a business and get paid for this. That's easy. That's great. But it's all those other hats of running a business. And one of those is thinking about the insurance. Why do we need insurance for a small business? The reason why you need insurance is to protect yourself against the risks of what other people might want to sue or make a claim against you. And for every business, it's a little bit different. I have some small business policies out there for folks who do landscaping and push snow, right? What is their risk? Well, when they're mowing, they could throw rock through a window or dent somebody's car. Or when they're pushing snow, they might run into somebody's car or hit something. I've got a small business policy out there for a dog groomer who works as 1099 independent under somebody else's dog shelter. And so what is their risk? Well, they might harm the dog, something might happen to the dog, or they might not be happy with the results. But as a 1099 working with another business, the business owner requires them to have that liability insurance. They're also responsible for that grooming area. So if somebody were to bring their dog in, slip and fall, That's on the groomer, not necessarily on the business owner, because that grooming area is there. So for folks who have brick and mortar locations, whether they own or rent, they are responsible for that area. So the liability insurance also protects against that type of slip and fall claim. Um, Depending on the type of business, again, if you have automobiles involved where you're doing a delivery service or construction with trucks and tools, you might have a separate auto policy under the business. There are ways, depending on the usage and how much, if your primary usage is that the vehicle is your personal vehicle and very little business, you might be able to use your personal policy for that coverage, but you need to let your company know that you are using it for business. Because if you don't tell them and they think you're using it for personal use, but you end up causing an accident while doing your business work, your insurance company is going to have a problem with that. So you need to let them know, and you may be able to cover it as part of your personal insurance. You may need a separate policy under your business, depending on how much you use that vehicle. If it is primarily used for business, definitely want to seek a separate business policy for that. Depending on the type of business you're in, there's other coverages and policies that may be available for the business. If you are in financial transactions, well, there's fiduciary coverage. For not-for-profits, you're going to want not only a liability policy for protecting you when you hold events, and whether you're doing liquor or not, that is a separate coverage and a separate cost to the policy, of course. But you're going to want something to protect your directors, a D&O, your directors and officers, something that will protect them and the decisions they make in their role to guide that not-for-profit. They're going to need a protection that if they make a decision and somebody doesn't like it or is harmed by it and decides to sue the organization, that will help protect as well. So it really depends on the type of business. Find yourself a good agent and just explore. Be open with them. Talk about what your business does, how you do it, where you do it, what's involved, how many people are involved. And that insurance agent can help you identify those risks and fit the insurance to what you need to get your business started.
How often should a new business owner be reviewing their policies and stuff like that as they kind of transition through different phases of their business? What is that time frame that they should be reevaluating if they have the proper insurance coverage?
That's a great question. And I encourage all of my business folks, whenever the renewals come out, whenever they get their annual renewal, to come talk to me. Give me a call. In my agency, we send emails out when we get notices as an agent before those renewals go to the customer. So we send emails to contact them. We send emails to contact them and let them know that renewal is coming up and invite them to contact us so we can review it. Now, I'll tell you that very few do. But some do, especially if they've had changes in their business. And that's exactly why you need to review the insurance as your business grows, or if you change. Maybe you're working from home when you start the business and then you want a brick and mortar. You definitely need that liability coverage for the brick and mortar, and maybe more coverage than from working at home. But annually, when those renewals come out, even in your personal policies, I encourage you to contact your agent and say, is everything looking okay? Here's what's changed in my life. Do we need to change the insurance? You don't have to know those things. That's what your agent is for. And frankly, that's what your agent gets paid to do. So call on them and let them do the work for you.
When they're kind of in that shopping phase, though, I know on my business coaching side of things, when I'm talking to individuals, I give them a list of questions to be asking to find the proper banker. But what questions should a new business owner be asking the insurance agents as they're kind of shopping around to see what insurance agency is the best, who's got the best policy for them? What should they be asking?
That's a great question. And I don't know if it's as much as asking as it is being able to disclose the full function of the business from soup to nuts. If you say, well, I'm baking bread. Okay, that's one thing. I'm baking bread and cupcakes. But are you doing it at home? Are you doing it at a brick and mortar? Are you delivering? How are you delivering? It's really more about the functionality of how you do, not necessarily what you do. Some elements of coverage protect where you do business. Some will protect how you do business, how you deliver those services and goods. So It's really more of an open discussion. The questions to ask, um, it's probably just get opinions from the different agents. If you're if you're shopping insurance with different agents, different companies, the questions should be able to compare one against the other. Would be more about asking them, do you think this is enough coverage? Or what deductibles do you think would be okay? Or, ask them about a particular coverage. Do you think I can put this on my auto policy cover, or do I need a separate policy? And you can compare at that point and kind of get a feel for, where those agents are coming from, what their understanding of your business is. And of course, with a new business, pricing is always a driving factor. So, if you're shopping for the insurance, try to make it a level playing field and give them all the same information. If a discussion with another agent goes a little deeper and something comes up that you haven't told the other agents, go back and tell them. They can adjust the quotes and give you a more even, a fair apples to apples type of comparison.
Okay.
Jamie, can I ask?
Yeah, absolutely.
Chris, one of the things that I have done or told clients to do, and I've done it, is when I'm given an estimate or, we're talking about a business policy, I always say, ask, okay, if a tornado comes through, what is my coverage? Or if I have a fire, because one of the things I found out, apparently flood is different. And when I say flood, we had a crack in the foundation. It really wasn't what I would call a flood, but the insurance company considered it flood, so they didn't cover that. And so just doing those scenarios, I've learned, helps me understand the policy, because honestly, when I hear insurance, I glaze over. Give me an IRS audit any day. Don't ask me to look at insurance.
Yeah.
So I really rely on my insurance agent. And one of the other things, my agent laughs at me, but if I'm going to trade vehicles, I always send her the EIN number or VIN number, I guess is what it's called, on and get a quote from my insurance before I even trade, and let her know if it's a business vehicle or personal. Sure. But I'm assuming that helps you guys help us. And it also helps educate us in what I call real life experiences.
Yes. I've often had customers who will do that. I'm looking at this vehicle or this vehicle. They want to know, which one is going to cost less, which costs more, that kind of thing. And a lot of that is tied to the vehicle and the safety ratings, those industry safety ratings that they all get. So whether or not you get that information from the salespeople, or whether or not you just want to see, does the insurance agree with what those stickers say on the window? That's certainly a fair thing to do. To touch on flood insurance, you brought that up, Tammy. Real quick, flood insurance is required if you live in a floodplain. And there's a very specific definition of what causes a flood. Just having rain, if your house isn't in a floodplain and the rain is causing a leak, that's not really a flood. So you may have some other questions you need to ask your insurance agent on that specific issue. If you don't live in a floodplain, then it's not really covered under a flood policy and should not necessarily be handled in flood type of insurance concern. So that's a different issue.
To kind of jump around a little bit though, I'm seeing a lot more less brick and mortar startup businesses and more e-commerce operating from their home and stuff like that. So when somebody comes and they're starting that business, but they're fully operating within their home, how do they begin to have those conversations to separate their home policy and personal versus the business policies?
That's a great question. So when we write a business policy, business liability policy, it will ask for an address, and whether or not you're using the whole building, part of the building. If it's out of your home, you'll need to define, Tammy knows this from an accounting standpoint, you define how many square feet of the home you're using that's allocated to business use versus personal use. And that also filters down to how you file your taxes with Tammy. And the same applies when you are getting the insurance for the business. If you're using one bedroom that is 10 by 12, you got 120 square feet, and you define that as business use, and that's what you would use for the policy. You would use your home address, define the square footage that is being used, and that would be bound in as your business address into the insurance policy. But as far as operating a business like that, there's going to be less of a concern about liability coverage because customers aren't coming in and out of your home to do business with you. In some cases they might, but in most cases not. But when you're online like that, there's a coverage for your finished goods and services and how they're delivered. If people aren't happy with them, or if there's problems with those goods and services that you deliver. For example, if somebody is, say, building outdoor furniture, right, and somebody's sitting in it, falls apart, and they get hurt, well, that could be a claim back on the person who built it. But that's also part of your business insurance as well, is those claims against the goods and services delivered, products completed, they call it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Well, and Chris, can you talk about cybersecurity? It seems like everybody gets hacked anymore, but I know myself, and I'm sure you're in the same boat, because we have so much personal information and bank accounts and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
When people work from home, I think they're a little more lax because it is their home. They can work on it. Just because I know back in the day when I was home based, it's like when I would leave the office for the night, I could lock that bedroom door so nobody could get in there. And, because, you got teenagers running through the house. Well,
Sure.
Avery and Caitlin don't understand that, but I think Jamie and you and I do.
Yeah.
But, they're going to run in and go, I need this, mom's got it on her desk. So, I kept that locked. And I also turned the internet off at nights, which really drove the boys up the wall. But just protecting those clients' information, especially if you got somebody that you bill every month, you might have their credit card information laying around.
Absolutely. And these days, a lot of that with small businesses is software that they'll license that's held out of house too. So it's sort of a shared responsibility. They may have some locally, but a lot of it is online as well. So they need to make sure that, they've got protection for themselves, but they also need, that's part of the agreement. Normally, when you sign up as an end user, that there are protections for you and your data stored on somebody else's systems. But from a cyber liability standpoint, it's a great question, Tammy. That is also an element that is in most business coverage, especially if you can do business coverage as an a la carte. I want just this coverage and just that coverage, or you can get what they call a business owner package. You might hear an agent call it a BOP, a business owner package, and a business owner package is basically a pre-grouped set of coverages. And with my farmers, if I go in and I tell farmers to start a pre-configured BOP package, it is soup to nuts. It's landscaping and signs and everything, including the cyber and employee. Whether or not you have employees, it's going to group in employee liability coverage as well. So, sometimes if I go that route, I have to take coverages back out to make it fit people. But the cybersecurity is one that it can be very, very important, especially if you're working online as well. And there's two sides to the cyber liability. The one that most people think about is, as you said, is protecting other people's information. You're responsible for that. So if it gets out as it's related to your business and your systems, then you're responsible for those financial results. That somebody else is doing something nefarious, but because it came out of your system, now you're responsible. Again, if you have those third parties that you're going through for your financial transactions, PayPal or Stripe or Venmo, whatever it is, they're also share a part of that responsibility. If it's their systems that are hacked, then that's not necessarily on you. But the other side of the cyber liability is a recovery cost. So the insurance for cyber liability can also pay for a recovery cost. If you do have local information that gets hacked from your local database, there is a cost to recovering that. How do we make sure? Because you're required to send letters to everybody that's in your database saying, hey, we probably all have gotten those letters at one time or another at home that says, oh, your information was involved in a security breach, right? Those letters are a requirement to be mailed out. So there's a cost to getting the letters put together, a cost to mailing them. There's a cost to securing your systems, having to recover your systems, pay for systems to be rebuilt, restored, and secured again. So all of that cost of the function of curing the hack is also bound in as an insurance coverage. So it's not just that liability portion, but your internal business recovery as well. It's a great question.
I want to take advantage of a second for having Tammy on here also. So Chris, this is for like you and Tammy. So thinking about what I've seen a lot across Callaway County specifically with the childcare, basically the childcare desert around here, and more individuals are starting to wanting to operate daycare facilities within their homes.
Yes.
From an accounting standpoint, Tammy, and B, from the coverage standpoint, can you kind of walk through those processes of what individuals need to be thinking about before they take that on in their home?
Go ahead, Tammy.
Well, one of the things I always, because when I had my big practice, I had a lot of home-based daycares, and I always told them, you go talk to your insurance agent because you don't want to get sued and lose your house. I mean, you're dealing with people's kids that are like their most precious, and parents can be very interesting.
Very protective.
But we also have talked about having just a section of the house for the daycare. Like Chris was talking, is 400 square feet is what you're going to use for the daycare. So the kids aren't running through your whole house. They're not napping in the master bedroom, and you got some napping downstairs. You can't keep track of what's going on. So getting that lined out, and I highly encourage them to get their state, I think it's called state certification, where they come in and they at least they get the paperwork so they know what's required. They may not go through it, but you can show that you're going through that process so parents are a little more comfortable with you. But even talking about I'm going to say the mulch you put around the playground stuff. I had one lady, the parent was trying to sue her because they used the ground up tires, because apparently that became a big thing because it was easier than mulch and all that, and it was supposed to be softer. Well, her kid was allergic to it and just came home with this major rash, and the parents wanted to sue her because of that. So there's so much to look at, but I don't want to go into all the tax details. You have a lot more tax advantages if you're home based sometimes. But a lot of them do try to hire 1099 contractors to work with them. That, if they're there 40 hours a week, they're an employee, and you've got to do the payroll, which then, Chris needs to know about that. So he's got them covered if an employee does something wrong. I had one client that the parents didn't like the way her employee looked. I mean, I don't, my kid went there, I didn't have, but so she had to fire her, or she was going to lose half of her kids because parents got their nose in a twit. I don't know if the lady just didn't smile enough. I don't know. But people are just strange. And I had a whole booklet of to-do things that I would give my home daycare providers when they came in. And I also had a list of insurance people that, because not every insurance agent, I won't say they can't cover it, but some have their little niche, just like sometimes CPAs do. Chris, maybe farmers are your niche, so maybe home daycare isn't. And I'm picking on you because you're on here, but some kind of get in that niche so they make sure they're providing better service. So, but that, and then the banker, I always told them they needed their CPA, their insurance agent, and their banker. And they needed to keep all of us informed. Is that what you wanted from the CPA side, Jamie, or did I go somewhere else?
No, you're good. I'm looking at all angles because I know this is a hot topic in the community. So when people are able to watch this unrecorded, like this is going to be answering some questions that I know that are floating through their minds.
Well, and I still I put together, it's an Excel spreadsheet. It's on my website. It's free as long as you've got Excel. I set it up for my daycare providers. At the top, it's like income 1, 2, and 3. They could put, parent payment, DFS payment, and food program payment. So they could post that each month, and then it kind of lists everything they need. And there is a highlighted section for if you're home base, what you need to have to take to your CPA, and insurance is in there. And I've got the work comp, I've got the payroll and liability in there. So they may not think to ask me, but when they look at that, and they don't have to use it, it's just kind of a template for them to, one, also figure out what can they write off. Because sometimes when you're home based, you don't know what you can write off.
Right.
Gotcha.
To add to that from an insurance side, a few things, and the daycare is a great discussion, and it's kind of triggered a few thoughts that I probably should have shared earlier, but I'm glad they're coming out now regarding insurance. One is that when you have a business policy, your insurance agent can provide you a certificate of insurance to prove that you're insured. I do that most commonly with folks that are putting other people's property at risk. The best example I can think of right now is a tree service. I've got some guys that run their own tree service, right? You call somebody to come cut a tree down. You don't want some guy that's going to drop a limb on your roof, right? You want somebody who is insured and can prove it. So when you have that business insurance, your insurance agent can provide a certificate of coverage, a proof of insurance, copies of it. So you can hand it out to folks just to show them and prove I am insured. Same thing with bonding. Your insurance agent can help you with bonding as well. So bonding is basically just a verification that you are honest and truthful. And if something were to happen, if you were to break your word or that sort of thing, there's the bond covers that element. So when I've got folks with tree services and such, and daycares fall in that as well, people want to make sure, are you insured? Is my child going to be safe in your hands? And is there coverage for things that might happen? But are you bonded as well? Are you trustworthy? And that's what bonding can do. If you think about it, like notaries, there's not many of those around anymore. That's not a very fun liability to be involved with for the most part. But the notaries are all bonded. When I was working in banking world for Central Bank, I was an officer of the bank. I had to be bonded. It's just one more label, I guess, that tells people that I can be trusted. And your insurance agent can help you with that. And with the daycares, I would say, yeah, that's really important to go get a bond as well on top of insurance, just to sort of prove that I'm okay, that you can trust me. And there's basically another type of insurance covering the situation here. But bonds really aren't that expensive, frankly. Not nearly as expensive as the insurance can be. And the insurance on a daycare, that is a particular type of coverage not a lot of insurance companies want to take because it is very high risk. Controlling kids is not something everybody's fit to do. And, everybody who runs a daycare has a different level of ability of dealing with kids and different ages of kids. Some deal with older kids better, some deal with the younger kids better. So there is risk in that. So depending on the company you're working with, they may or may not want to cover it. And, if somebody's starting a daycare in the home, and they go to the agent that they've used for 20 years for home and auto, and their parents use the same agent, and the agent says, I can't insure that, don't be offended by it.
Right.
That's a decision of the company, not of the agent, whether or not the company will take the risk. It's not really up to the agent necessarily. I'm sure in a situation where the agent knows the family, knows you, they want to help you. But if the company won't take the risk, then it may have to be placed somewhere else. The other side that Tammy brought up is the workers' comp. In this state, 5 employees or more, you're required to have workers' comp. Or if you have a construction business, you're required to have workers' comp, regardless. If it's just you in a construction business, you still have to have the workers' comp going. From a daycare standpoint, having workers' comp might help you attract workers if you need additional workers. That's attractive to folks to come to work for you versus working somewhere else, to have a workers' comp policy to cover them in case they're injured while on the job. So lots of different things to think about in a daycare. A lot of people think it's easy. I love kids. I'm going to take care of kids and I'll get paid to take care of your kids, and it's all fun and games. But there is a business to it. You got to put all the hats on and think it through.
Absolutely.
Well, and back to what Chris said, if you're the business owner, but you contract with somebody, the tree service, the construction, you hire another business, let's say you hire a drywaller to come in because you're building your facility. You want to make sure they have, Chris, is it called liability insurance?
Yes.
Because when you go through your work comp audit, if you don't have those certificates in there, then you end up paying work comp on that contractor. Have I got that right? I'm not probably using the right insurance words, Chris.
Well, in a situation like that with a 1099, you want to make sure you require them to have their own insurance.
Right.
So they're covered by their own insurance. And in that situation, as the person employing the 1099, employing is really not the right word, hiring the 1099, you can ask to be named as an additional insured on their policy. So their policy will be extended to you as the hiring element as well. You want your own insurance, but you want to be able to claim against their insurance as well if it's work resulting from that particular hired individual. So you can ask to be named in that situation. It's kind of a little bit backwards from what we're talking about, but as a business owner, if you're hiring those 1099s, definitely ask to be named on their insurance. And the way that's done is to ask to be an additional insured, and they should be able to issue you a specific certificate of coverage with your name on it as additional insured.
I had when those tornadoes hit Columbia years ago, he didn't do roofs, so he hired a roofing company, and he had the W-9s, which was fine, so they could give out the 1099s, but since he didn't have proof that they had their own insurance, whoever had his work comp forced him to pay work comp on all the income he paid the roofers for that, and it ended up bankrupting him. He had to shut the company down because he paid him 100%. I had some other people, I don't know if this was legal, but they did it. They figured out what the work comp rate was, and if they didn't have proof of work comp, they deducted that from their pay and kept it in a savings account to pay when they had their work comp. And I'm like, you're gonna have to talk to attorney about that one. I don't know if that's legal, but that's what they did if somebody couldn't produce proof of their insurance if they hired them as a contractor. So you don't have to respond to that one, Chris, because I honestly don't know if it was legal. They just came in and they said that's what they did, and I'm like, okay, this is what you paid them. I put it on the
I
tax
don't know if
return.
that specific situation was legal or not to withhold the amount. It sounds like they're withholding the amount to pay the policy cost,
Right,
which is minuscule compared to the claims that could result.
right. Yeah, so
it sounds like it might have been well intended. I'm not sure absolutely if it's legal or not, but if that's what was intended and they get sued, it won't be near enough to satisfy any claims that would come against them in that mode. So
yeah, that's why I sent them to an attorney. I said, you need to find out how I said, I think this is how, they need to have their insurance, or you probably shouldn't be hiring them. But there's only so much we can do as professionals to help others. We can advise them and direct them, but we can't make them do it.
It sounds like in that case, that business owner was trying to be forward thinking, but was not really
Yeah.
covering the situation that could result. Wasn't
Yeah.
really thinking far enough.
Right.
To kind of keep it on the same line of in-home businesses, but daycares are a completely separate entity in my book. I want to think about the individuals that are starting their businesses that are maybe doing nutritional coaching, like personal training, massage therapy, nail salons, hair salons, things of that nature. What do those individuals need to be thinking about? Because I know you've been very specific, especially with Tammy explaining like that square footage in their home and stuff like that. But now you have physical people coming on your home, on your property and stuff.
Yeah.
What do they need to be looking for?
Yeah. So it definitely starts with that liability coverage. Anytime anybody comes into your home, you're liable for their well-being, frankly, right? If there's a spilled drink and you slip and fall in your own home, you're not covered. You're supposed to keep your own home safe. If somebody else slips and falls on a drink, that's your fault. So your home coverage may pay for that. Or if it's part of the business relationship again, right? You're using your garage for massage therapy and you got the table set up in there and they come in the garage and slip and fall. Or something falls off the garage wall and hurts them. That's on the business because you're using that as business space, and that would fall under that liability coverage. You're supposed to keep the area safe and keep them free from risk. There's additional liability that comes involved, of course, anytime you're touching anybody. If you're doing their nails, especially massage, right? If they think you touched them inappropriately and decide to sue you, that's also going to be covered as part of a liability insurance. And it is definitely a huge reason you want to have insurance and a decent level of insurance protection. Because if somebody thinks they've been physically offended, lawyers these days will go after large sums of money, and people are happy to do that. It has become a fairly litigious society, as sad as that is to say. But you definitely need those protections in place. The other thing, like I said before, with making lawn furniture, if you're baking out of the house, those sort of things, you become responsible if your baked goods aren't labeled correctly for allergies and the ingredients and those sort of things, and you make somebody sick or you trigger an allergy. You can be held liable for that, and that's where your completed products coverage would come in as well.
Well, I know I have a friend who has her salon in her home because she has children. And of course, you're supposed to go through the state to get your licensure with that. The state required her to have a separate entrance for clients. They can't walk through her house to that.
Right.
And the other thing that you probably don't think about it, but the fumes from perms and different products, she had to have I'm gonna say a fan ventilation system put in, so that didn't go through the whole house and potentially affect the kids. Because, if you think about somebody working 6 days a week doing hair, that would be a lot of perfume and different smells. Now, I've never worked with anybody that had a nail salon in their home, but I know just like walking by one at the mall, and of course they have, I don't know what, 20, 30 people in there doing nails. So the stench really comes out. So I would assume you would need to have some type of ventilation for that also to protect your family, because yes, you're trying to make a living to support your family, but you don't want what you're doing for a living to end up causing health issues and things. Because if you got the same heating and AC, that's going to go through your whole home. So I know the one lady that I know, she her husband ended up having to put a whole nother, well, she's got like a little heater in there and her own little window AC, and it's not connected to the house to keep the smells down. So and the state required that. And I'm assuming it would be very similar if you're doing nails. I've never had a nail salon person at home that did work from their home. So
That brings up another interesting point to some businesses as a differentiator of the level of risk. You think about a nail salon, you think it's pretty innocuous, they're painting nails, but not just the polishes, they've got a lot of chemicals and fumes and things, but the acetones they use as removers and, different chemicals and treatments have different risks to them. Somebody might have a reaction, get hurt, their finger starts swelling up and rash or whatever. But it can also apply to, painters, all the different paints. If somebody's allergic to latex and you hire them to go paint, well, there's a risk. If you're painting in somebody else's house, there's a risk to that. You definitely want to be covered, insured in case you drip paint on somebody's carpet or you're painting and knock something over and break it. But that's an element of the type of business, what risk to be identified. And that's, again, one more reason to be open with your insurance agent. One of the questions that generally comes up in a business policy is, are they working with harmful or risky chemicals? And then they want more information about that. What type of chemicals? How are you using them? How often are you using them? That sort of thing. So it's, every business has a different level of risk. And that's, again, where we started from. It's just really good to sit down with the agent and be open about what you're doing and how you're doing it, what you're using to do it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Caitlin.
Okay, I want to go to another field, which would be farmers. So like my family, we have the land, but then we have family members that will raise their cows on them.
Yes.
But is it safe to say that our farms separate from personal and business, or at what point do you consider it a business, the farm itself? Same for like chicken owners. We have chickens as well, and sometimes we're just giving away the eggs, sometimes we're selling the eggs. At what point will we really need to focus on looking at insurance, and at what point is it also a business that we need to separate it?
Yeah, great question. From an insurance standpoint, the separation of a farm liability from a home liability depends on a couple of things. How big is the farm? How many acres? How big is it in income? Is it a primary source of income for the family? Is it your primary business or not? So if you have a home with 5 acres and you're doing a hobby farm and you're selling vegetables at the farmer's market, you don't absolutely have to have insurance for that, right? And 5 acres, 10 acres, 20 acres can be appended to your home policy under a farm liability coverage. And you can list tractors and you can list barns and that sort of thing. And one of the questions that normally comes up under that, as part of home coverage, adding a farm liability to the home policy is, how much money do you make from it? Do you lease it to others? You can also protect livestock under the policy. But it all depends really on how big it is and how much you rely on it as income. If it's a primary income, then you want a separate farm policy for that, separate from the house. And having that separate policy enables you to get better coverage for your tractors and equipment, better coverage for liability, better coverage for hired individuals as well. And if you're leasing, it can also extend for that leasee, but excuse me, I got a fly around here. It's a great question, and it really depends on the size of it and how much money you're making from it necessarily. But it can also introduce the same kind of situation too if you're hiring people in workers' comp, and if you're leasing and if farmers are leaving their equipment on your place, you could ask for proof of insurance, but normally in those situations, it's family, friends, close relations that you normally wouldn't ask that of. But from a purely business sense, you probably should. If that tractor gets stolen off their farm, who's responsible? Off your farm, it's their tractor on your farm and it gets stolen. Who's responsible for that, right? Normally, if it's a friend or family, they probably wouldn't hold you liable for it. And normally in farming, that's usually a very close-knit community and it's okay. But in a purely business sense, they should have their own insurance.
Well, Chris, you brought up farmers market. When you do a farmers market, do they require you to have like a liability policy for that day or whatever to set your booths up? I never thought about it till you mentioned it.
Yeah. It depends on who's operating the market and where it's located. For example, there's one here in Holt Summit that for a couple of years, because of a struggle between the city and the organizers on licensing requirements, they held it just outside city limits for a couple of years. Now the city's kind of loosened some of that and they're working better together, so they moved it back in the city limits. So the city's policies on the business licensing, they weren't going to allow a blanket license for the organizer. They wanted every business to have a business policy or a business license with the city. And part of that again is the city required as part of the licensing, they required them to have a state business license, which Tammy, as you know, isn't required if they're not earning over a certain amount of money. Is it $3,000 a year, Tammy?
I think it's up to 3. It used to be 2, but yeah,
I
it's
think
in
it's
that.
3,000. If they're not earning 3,000 a year or more, they're not required to have a state license. But for a while, Holt Summit was requiring them. Every vendor needs a license, and every vendor needs a state license. But that was kind of an egregious ask, and they eventually have settled that. But it just depends on, again, how much are they making? Do they need a business license? And how much are they producing and selling? A lot of these folks who come out, not a lot, but some who come out to these farmers markets, they're buying their vegetables by the truckload somewhere else and selling them. They're not growing them themselves. They're just an intermediary. So in those situations, they've got a little bit different angle. Folks who grow their own vegetables and sell them, they're generally not going to qualify to the level of requiring a business license. And after that, it's just dependent on the farmers markets. I'm not aware of one that requires anybody to have a business license or proof of insurance.
So
sure they're
if
out
somebody does, playing devil's advocate, if somebody would slip and fall at a farmer's market and get hurt, who are they going to sue? Because they're going to sue somebody.
Yeah, generally there's going to be an organizer of the farmers market, and they should be the one liable.
Okay.
And a lot of these farmers markets are held on either public locations or sometimes private locations. But for example, the one here in Holt Summit is now held in the elementary school parking lot. But the elementary school has to give them permission, and I'm sure they've got insurance. But the organizer of the farmers market has probably got insurance as well. I don't know this situation specifically, but they should have their own insurance. Otherwise, yeah, the school could be held liable. Absolutely.
Okay, I see a lot of them, like you said, like Tractor Supply or Orscheln's, those places that have large parking lots. A lot of times on Saturday from 9 to noon or something, they'll let them set up. And I've often wondered how that worked. I've never asked anybody there, but
yeah. Well, if the business gives permission, they're accepting part of the liability. In Fulton, it's actually held in the city street. They shut down a block of the street and they all set up tents in the street. So the city is going to be responsible for some of that.
Okay, that was curiosity. How you say one thing and it pops another thought in your head.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of that's just on friendly trust. We're just trying to help out the community. We're trying to help out those folks that are growing their vegetables and selling them. That's really what the farmers markets were started about, letting local growers get good quality produce to the local residents, right? But there are, like I said, folks who will go out, buy it by the truckload and bring it in and sell it. That's okay. That's great. That's not the kind of people I necessarily like to support. I like those local growers and helping those local people. And that's really the spirit of those farmers markets. So whether or not somebody would actually sue, you would hope not. It's all in a community spirit. So you would hope it wouldn't go south in that direction, but there are protections for that. And generally it belongs to the property where it's being held.
I want to ask kind of a question and focus it a little bit more on maybe like leasing and contracts and stuff and the coverage that needs to come with it. And I know this is a too soon question with what just happened in the community yesterday, but I think a lot of business owners are going to start thinking about this and their coverage based off of what is the landlord's responsibility in those contracts versus what is the tenant, and what should be now looked upon in people's contracts and stuff to make sure that they're properly covered.
No, it's an excellent question and should always be looked at, especially in the events of yesterday. So landlords are typically responsible for the building structure and the outside, typically, unless you've got an agreement and a lease that's written differently. That's the typical construction, is that the building itself, structure, walls, doors, locks, and exterior parking lots, sidewalks, etc., landscaping, that's typically the landlord's responsibility. When you rent or lease that space internal, you now become responsible for that. Any of the slips and falls, keeping it clean, things picked up, that kind of thing. The operation inside is what you're responsible for. Is the general breakdown, unless your lease is written differently, and it may be. That all comes down to the agreements and what you sign, which is also what you said in a contractual arrangement. You want to read them very, very closely. You want to read word for word. Sometimes it can be exciting to get your own business, and you're going to get that brick and mortar, and I'm really stepping up, and it feels great, and it's fun, and let me just sign. Slow down and take the time. Make sure you're reading, you're not getting into something that you don't understand. And if you don't understand, ask. Talk those things out. If there's something in the lease you don't like, talk with them. You may be able to negotiate, you maybe not. I don't know. It depends on the building, the situation, and the building owner. Sometimes a building owner will be in a position to say, hey, I got 5 people wanting it. So if you won't agree, I'll go to the next guy. That puts you in a tough situation if you're trying to bargain on something you don't necessarily agree with. Well, maybe it's not really the right location for you, or not really the right owner. Find another location in the area with a different owner. Contract negotiations are a really strange area because they are highly detailed. You've got to take your time. They are long-term binding. So when you agree to something, know the terms on it. When does it start? When does it end? And they're also highly subject to who you're contracting with. So personalities can come into that a little bit, which is why you want everything in writing. Sometimes they're great situations, and sometimes they don't work out.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on how a startup business would be maybe have the confidence to negotiate on what's going into those contracts and things that they should be asking for?
Great question. And what I most advise people, because sometimes that business owner either doesn't have, a personal attitude to be that forward or to be that direct. Sometimes they just they may not have a business understanding of the long-term picture. They don't have, a full business plan put together, where I want to go, where I want to be. Sometimes they do. It comes down to personality and how you negotiate into these things. But the one thing I can say is that in every situation, if you put your customers in mind, you're there to provide a good, provide a service. You want to help people with what you do. Think of that motivation. This is one more requirement to being able to build that business, to get out of the home into a brick and mortar. That's a huge step up. That's a growth. That's a milestone. And it's a great thing, but you want to approach it carefully. But you want to approach it in a way that it's not necessarily about you as the business owner. It's about serving your customers better, serving more customers, serving them better, serving them, in ways that will elevate your product, will elevate your brand. The motivation, don't let it scare you, but the motivation should be the business and your customers. What can I make out of this? That's the motivation. It may not be a pleasant experience to read through contracts, and some people are very intimidated, and I understand that. But again, a good accountant, a good lawyer, good insurance agent, a good trusted friend can help you with this as well. Don't feel like you have to go through it alone. If somebody's pressuring you to sign that contract right now without taking it and reading it, or allowing a lawyer to look at it, it's probably not a good contract to sign. Take your time. If you're negotiating a contract with someone, you say, hey, I really, really want this brick and mortar space. Can I have 5 days to go over this, get it checked and approved? Will you allow me 5 days? Get those kind of agreements so they don't go off and lease it to someone else while you're thinking about the situation. But contracts can be intimidating, definitely can, but not something to be afraid of. Just approach it very factually, very logically, read the contract. Each paragraph has a different reason and they normally have a heading. Each paragraph has a different purpose. And as long as you take it point for point, make sure you understand it, ask questions of anything you don't understand, definitely get the contract checked, either legal wise or somebody that you trust, who's familiar with contracts and contract signing and your business. But the motivation has to be in the heart. You want to move the business forward. You want to build the brand. You want to help your customers. You want to build that product base. That's the motivation.
Well,
With
Jamie,
that, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
well, I just wanted to, when I have these startup businesses come to me, I always send them to you, the Small Business Development Center. I said, you guys have so many resources. You have an excellent list of responsible professional businesses that you can refer them to so they don't get taken advantage of by some shady whoever. And you guys do such a good job of helping these businesses get everything, their foundation built and connecting them to Chris or me or whoever they need in their wheelhouse, so they're not alone. So I know sometimes people get frustrated. It's like, well, can't you do this? I said, yes, but a lot of what you can do for them, I would charge them. And why pay me to do something when they can go to you and you can get them on the right foot. And then when they come back to me, they're paying me for what they need me to do.
Right.
And that's why having you in our community and the services you guys provide is so important, because you guys actually help Chris and I be better at what we do for our clients.
Absolutely.
So, sorry,
I
I
appreciate it. No,
No,
but
thank
that
you,
really
Tammy.
is on a piece another piece that small business owners need to really look at. That's the kind of responses that they need to see, that you're not there to just take their money. That's building that trust factor. And as I talk to every single person that walks through these doors, we're all about finding out, who are we building for your team?
right.
And so when they know that they're going to go and they're going to ask you questions and then you're going to refer them, it's not because you're pushing them away, but it's because you're truly, investing in what they're doing. And you do not, because it is a cost of goods, and you are running a business the same as they are trying to start running a business. And that is what they need to understand, that when you're getting referred over here, it's not because you don't want to help them. You do, but you want to be helping them for the right reasons and not overcharging them for something when they can get it over here from a trusted individual.
Right. Well, and it's like I had somebody the other day that was asking me questions, and it was about a farm, and I'm like, I don't know, you need to get a hold of Chris Scott. And I took a picture of your card and emailed it to him. So, will they pick up the phone and call you? I don't know, but I couldn't answer those questions, and anything I would have said would have probably been wrong. And then,
Yeah.
so, and they did thank me, so hopefully they will call you, Chris. I don't know. But having a team, and I see it as that. I used to call it the three-legged stool, but now I've changed it to having a team that we're not on your payroll and you don't have to pay work comp on. Clients kind of get a laugh out of that one. They're like, well, we like not having to pay for you. So.
Well,
One thing
Tammy,
that-
if I may, I just want
Yeah.
to say thank you, Tammy, for stating the obvious that I overlooked. And yes, kudos to Jamie, Caitlin, the chamber, and the small business work that you do. An excellent resource. And everything we're talking about is backed up by what you do. And if it's not a service you provide, Tammy's right. You've got the connection in the community and know where to send people as well for this help. So, Tammy, thank you for stating the obvious, and shame on me for overlooking it. But
You would have said
thank
it
you.
eventually. I just beat you to it.
I do want to be mindful of the time because we have been on here for an hour, but Chris, I just want to ask you one last question and an overview of all of the years in services and the different hats and stuff that you wear. What would your one piece of advice that you wish you would have got at the very start of your career? What would you give somebody that is starting out in their entrepreneurship journey?
Oh, wow. So I don't know if this is necessarily where you wanted it to go, because I had the basis of coming up through business and going through multiple levels of management to being a corporate director before I started my own business. So I had that internal look at how other businesses, small businesses, big businesses, I was a corporate director of a local a local software development office for a larger, basically nationwide company that had 5 offices, 1,100 employees. I was just over this one local office, but I had that experience of being in a larger business network before I started my own business. So I had a great look at how all other businesses, lots of other businesses have run. The biggest, I say that just to say this, the biggest piece of advice to give folks starting their own business is, you may be super good at what you're starting your business to do. You may have all the passion in the world for what you do, but be prepared to spend just as much time in running the business, the technicals of the business, the marketing, insurance, financial planning, the accounting of it. Are you prepared to track all your income, all your expenses? Fill out that Schedule C with your accountant. That's, you're going to put as much time into running and building the business as you are doing what you love to do. Most people start a business because I really love to do this one thing and I want to do it all the time. Guess what? When you become a business, you don't have all the time to do that because there's a lot of other requirements. And if you come in it with a realistic view that this is a business and I'm required to take these steps to make sure the business is healthy, then it gives you the power to do what you love to do. You just can't do it all the time, but it may actually make you better as well. All the time organization, understanding the business, how to grow, the branding, marketing. It is more than just having a passion for something you like to do. But if you have a passion for business and growing and making yourself better, small business is incredible.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Chris. That piece of advice right there, that little wisdom, that goes a long way. And I see it across, and that's what really needs individuals to sit down and really think about it. And that's what takes it from a hobby of just helping somebody with a service versus really trying to escalate it and build that business, is understanding there's more than just this over here. But thank you so much for joining us this morning, and everyone,
Absolutely.
Tammy, Caitlin, Emily on here. Thank you guys for joining us. I know it's odd. It's a Thursday morning instead of a Monday, but thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for
Absolutely.
doing it, and thanks for having it virtual too. So
Absolutely.
I can come.
All right. Well, we will see you guys all soon. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Take care.
Bye.